Yeah, it's something that the family is saying was a long time illness that he'd been suffering from, Aaron. But still, when someone this iconic passes away, you definitely see the reverberation and the feeling going out that someone who just created so much through all of his music and the writing and his guitar playing as well, just feeling that. I want to read to you a bit of the statement from David Crosby's family that we have received here at CNN. It says in part, "It is with great sadness after a long illness that our beloved David Crosby has passed away. He was lovingly surrounded by his wife and soulmate Jan and son Django. Although he is no longer here with us, his humanity and kind soul will continue to guide and inspire us. His legacy will continue to live on through his legendary music." And they go on to wish peace, love, and harmony to all who knew David and to all the people that he touched. And one of the people that he did touch as well was Melissa Etheridge, who was his good friend, but also he was the biological father to her children. And let me just read what her tweet says here. It says, I am grieving the loss of my friend and Bailey's biological father, David. He gave me the gift of family. I will forever be grateful to him, Django, and Jan. His music and legacy will inspire many generations to come, a true treasure. So there you have people who knew him not just for his music, but also knew David Crosby, the person, mourning the loss of this iconic American musician. Aaron?
All right, Stephanie, and as you point out, iconic musician with a complicated life that so many followed over so many years. Thank you so much. And let's bring in now Bill Weir, who interviewed Crosby for a special on Woodstock, and Jim Moret, the chief correspondent for Inside Edition. So thanks so much to both of you. Bill, you're here with me. Let me start with that. You traveled to David Crosby's home. You interviewed him extensively for this documentary on Woodstock, which would have been, sort of their big moment, right? Onto the stage, shall we say, for the first time. What was that like?
It was such a thrill on so many levels. As a music fan, it was a thrill, but he's one of my hands down top 3 interviews ever because he's so open and honest. He could be a prickly SOB, as many of his bandmates will attest, but he could be the sweetest, just loving guy. And when you're sitting in his house and he says, you want to hear some music I've just written? And he's got his ponies there. He lives in sort of Central Valley near wine country. His cannabis plants, his lovely wife, Jan, his family. Because his really theme later in life was second chances. He would joke that I can't believe Hendrix and Morrison didn't make it and I'm still here because of the way he punished himself physically. He did some time for his cocaine and heroin addiction in Texas in the 80s, and had a liver transplant, but then came back and wasn't content to just do cover songs. He wrote 5 albums in 5 years later in life, even as his health was failing. And a lot of complicated feelings out there.
Absolutely, but an incredible person with so many layers, and why so compelling. I mean, Jim, we mentioned Crosby, Stills, and Nash performed just their second gig at Woodstock, which was, of course, why Bill was speaking to him originally. When he spoke to Larry King about this, he was reflecting on the 25th anniversary of Woodstock, and that was back in 1994. I just wanted to play this one particular thing he said.
Like the rest of our generation, we had a rough road. We went through some very tough stuff. I'm one of the lucky ones that wound up alive afterwards. I feel now incredibly grateful to get to play music and be a part of this. I'm really awfully happy. I had what the French call a raison d'être. I have a reason to be here. I'm lucky in that I really love to play music, and I've got great people to do it with.
Jim, how big of a loss is this of someone who was such an icon and over so many decades?
First of all, I envy Bill Weir for having the opportunity to talk with him in person. He had a social responsibility that he showed through his music. Often his music reflected the times and the strife that he talked about. I became a teenager. I became 13 in 1969 when they played Woodstock. It had a tremendous influence on me and others in my generation. I think that you will remember David Crosby, not just for his music, but for the beautiful harmonies that he and Crosby, Stills, and Young would perform together. But as much of a harmony as they would have vocally, there was a tremendous amount of strife personally with these bandmates, and he had falling outs with them. But the legacy of his music will endure, and I think it's a beautiful and long-lasting one.
And perhaps incredible when you think about to have such strife and, you know, sort of the band name keeps changing, people are in and out, yet to be able to create something so beautiful, something we all can just ponder. And Bill, since you did have a chance to talk to him, I think what's amazing is among the things you talked about with him was death. Death and legacy at a point in his life when he was able to reflect upon that. And I wanted to play part of the exchange he had with you.
Good to see it. In this burst of creativity that you've had, you sing about death.
Stand up and face it.
Do you think about how you want to be remembered?
Not so much. The songs will do that. They're the best I can do. That's a weird thing. Everybody's scared to talk about it. The question is, what are you going to do with it? How do you spend that 2 weeks or that 10 years? And I got that figured out. Family, music.
Yeah, we got to get ourselves back to the garden.
Because it's the only thing I can do.
You get the goosebumps
He
of that,
gives
not
me
so much.
that voice gives me goosebumps, especially with Joni Mitchell in there, who they were a pair for a little while.
An item for a
An
while,
item,
yeah.
and then Graham Nash was, and that made part of the complication right there. But yeah, later in life, you know, he gave up a son for adoption in the '60s named Raymond, who came back into his life later, who became a musician. They recorded together. He just had such sweet, but again, to sort of Jim's point, it struck me when we talked together, like if the guys who made that 3-part harmony at 3 in the morning at Woodstock can't keep it together, what hope is there for the rest of us? And he said, no, there was bad stuff before that happened, bad stuff after. Woodstock was what we could be. We should strive towards that love.
It's also amazing in what he said here, and you know, maybe it's at the stage of life that I'm at, you think about your life, and he says, how do you spend those 2 weeks or 10 years? And I got that figured out. There's something very beautiful about that.
Absolutely. I think, you know, he would say, I've had a lucky long run, I think. He'd say, you could throw a party for me, but the music he made, like he said, especially the new stuff, hopefully people go back and listen to some of the newer stuff and honor him that way.
Jim, Graham Nash, who Crosby, of course, had a falling out with, he just reacted, talking, I'll quote him, "It's with a deep and profound sadness that I learned my friend David Crosby has passed. I know people tend to focus on how volatile our relationship has been at times, but what has always mattered to David and me more than anything was the pure joy of the music we created together, the sound we discovered with one another, and the deep friendship we shared over all these many long years. David was fearless in life and in music." That is a tribute.
It is, and I think that his friends loved him and often hated him, but they always had the music, and that was what lasted, and it kept them bonded together and will endure long after they're gone, and I think it's still beautiful today.